Originally produced for paranormal television, the Fausty Witches Show was designed to be a Q&A show, but ended up causing offence to the neo-pagan and paranormal community. The show was eventually axed and has remained in the archives ever since. That is, until now. For every day of December in 2021, the Thoth Witchcraft Shop will now be releasing an archive episode. Starting now. Right, I think we're online. Look at this. Can you believe it? We've been given our own dodgy witchcraft chat show. I don't know what they think they've let themselves in for, but it's going to be an education, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
So
you started
anyway,
calling them paras. Is that okay? Do you think we're allowed to call them paras?
I don't know. Are you allowed to call paranormal investigation people paras? Let us know in the comments. I don't know if that's acceptable. I don't want to insult anyone.
So we'll get to that bit later.
It's better than what I used to call them.
I've told you that.
So today, obviously, we're talking about spell casting. So I thought, seeing this is our kind of inaugural episode, our first episode, people can jump on and ask anything they want. But if we start with a theme, otherwise we're just doing the general. We'll wait for some comments. We'll wait for people to come and all that kind of crap. So let's delve right in. What do you think the problem is when it comes to trying to educating people with how spells work and how to cast spells and stuff? Because it's a popular question. Everyone's always going on about how do spells work. My spell didn't work. Why didn't it work? What spell book should I buy and all that crap? So educate us, Chris.
Okay. I think I'm going to start with something that probably won't have come to your mind, believe it or not, which is, I think, is the perception. So I think a large thing that you've got to battle is Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all those that, anything from Tolkien, a large part of it is that of, they expect point and shoot. Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the first version, not the new one. The new one's a bit more realistic,
right?
But that kind of that cinematic version of witchcraft, I think, is the first thing when you approach a mundane or a new practitioner. Sorry, you'll get used to that. We tend to call Muggle folk. We call them mundane.
Non-magical folk, mundane. Why do we call them mundanes? Because they're boring.
That's what we've always called them
in EastEnders and stuff. It's very mundane. Mundane people lead mundane lives.
Mundane lives.
Yeah.
Non-magical lives. So yeah, so I think that's my biggest problem with the first thing is get that over that initial. You ride broomsticks then, got conical hats. You've got a cat. Right. Well, yes, I do have a cat, but his name's not,
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Mundane's also in Shadowhunters. I think that's why we like it.
I tell you what, show. Mundane's in Shadowhunters, but don't for one second think that we stole that from them. I swear they stole that from me, because I've been saying that for years. Mundane is so much better. Like people say muggle and that from Harry Potter and all that. Muggle's a crappy word, right? Mundane, literally. I'm a big fan of words that really do describe what they're supposed to actually refer to. So mundane is the perfect word to give to a mundane, because they're mundane, right?
Yeah.
But you're a sidetrack now.
I'm sidetracking, but I think it's a good sidetrack, because at the end of the day, I think that's the first thing you've got to get past is when you kind of come out the broom closet and you've admitted to a group of friends that, you practice witchcraft, or, it is that first kind of initial reaction of, what are you then? What does that mean? And then the next thing that normally comes out of their mouth is, oh, so you mean you're Wiccan?
Oh no.
No,
Not
isn't
the
that the
W
first thing that
word.
then said after that? So you go, so first you go, yes, I'm a witch, and then they go, oh, well, one, it's, don't you mean warlock? Is normally the
Uh,
first thing, and then the second thing is, oh, you mean Wicca? And then I'm
yeah.
like, no,
Well, that's a religion, I suppose, and that's a religion that's put a lot of money into marketing over the past since the
yeah,
1950s when it was created. They put a lot of money into marketing
they
that
have,
religion, and it's a global thing now. Unfortunately, they go around referring to themselves as witches, which means that everyone seems to think of witches as either Harry Potter witches or Wiccans, and it means
yeah.
that the vast majority of us that are left out of that, people don't really quite get it. But yeah, so spell casting. Do you want to explain your kind of fire triangle, your triangle of manifestation?
You want me to go straight to that?
Go straight
Okay,
to it, and
that's
then we
fine.
can pick it apart later if
Okay,
people don't quite
that's fine.
understand.
So interestingly enough, someone in the comments has already put, it's all about intention
Oh, did they?
on the list.
I can't see that.
Yeah.
Oh no, oh, there it is. Look,
So
it's all about
someone has
intention.
already
Okay.
already started.
It's not all
Yes,
about
that's
intention at all. That's bollocks. Put it this way: if spellcasting was as simple as intention, the world would be a much different place. If you're lying, if you're
most of
sat
you would already
opposite,
be dead.
yeah, if you're
Like,
sat opposite some poor person that's dying of a terrible, debilitating condition in hospital, and you really, really want them to get better, if it was really all about that intention, that person would get better. It's not all about the intention at all. And I think Chris is itching to explain why.
gonna make me do this. So I always teach my fire triangle. So most people are familiar at some, particularly if you're from the UK, you'll have been taught at some point what is required for a fire to happen. So you have this. They give the little red triangle, and it's got oxygen, uh, heat source, and then I've suddenly thought, what's the other option?
I'm presuming we're
How
allowed to
bad's
swear
that?
on here. Guys, are we allowed to swear on here? I don't know. I didn't read
Well, you've
anything in
already
the.
done it too many times as it is. If
Yeah, but
if
I am
if they
said the
were going
C
to pull
word
the plug, I think they'd have already pulled it.
now. Fire
So
triangles, Chris.
yeah, sorry, fuel. That was the other one. Fuel. And someone's just caught me up. Sorry. Yeah, you need something to burn. You need oxygen and keep it going, and you need a heat. So yeah. So what I tend to do is magic is the same. It works in that same way. The difference is the fuel that's required is the energy source. You need an energy source to keep it going. And then the other two are, now this is where it gets tricky, because I used to use the word intention for the
Mm.
other, which it's not. It's a better word for that keeps coming up. Mainly I think it's because I've been working with too many shamans lately, but
Right.
we keep using the word journey. How do you feel about that one?
Yeah, I don't like that either. I think
I
that
didn't think
neither
you
of
would.
them are perfect, and we'll have to come up with a better one. Because the
Yeah,
problem
we'll
with
have to come up with a better
intention
one.
is intention's always like, I kind of intended to go to work today, but actually I just stayed in bed and pulled a sickie. I intended to do that, but I
But it's
didn't.
not that though,
And
is it?
it's not. Intention is
When I talk about
literally,
intention, I'm talking
it's,
about the pathway in
yeah,
which the energy is going to take its route in order to get to the third item on the triangle, which is the focal point.
yeah.
So to me, the focal point is probably what most people in of the Wiccan variety, etc., will call intention, which is what
Mm,
you want to happen. When
yeah.
I say intention, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the route travelled by the energy in order to get to the final point.
So
So
the journey to
that's what you've got.
manifestation.
Yeah.
Journey to
And then
manifestation. Let's call it journey then. Let's go with what you were talking
we
about.
go in with journey
Yeah,
for that.
we'll
I
go
just
with
think it
journey.
makes things easier than using the
We've
word
got
intent.
fuel and we've got journey. What else is the next bit of the triangle?
Is the focal point. You're
The
just not
focal.
listening to me, are you already?
I'm listening.
He's
but
already not listening to
we
me.
need to repeat and tile this nicely together.
Okay. So yeah, so you need three things. You need an energy source, you need the journey, the intended journey, and you need the focal point. And those these things come together in order to make a spell manifest. So go on, now start pulling it apart. Because you know that's the only reason you made me do that.
I'm not going to pull it apart. However, I think there is something that's very serious that we need to cover. And it's something that gets lumped into the spell variety. And I am somewhat kind of, I kind of accept it, but at the same time, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth, right? If I want to go and burn someone's house down non-magically, I would do that. I would get your fuel. You've all made a petrol bomb, I'm sure, when you were at school. No, maybe just me. You pour the fuel in, you put the rag in, you light it, and then you throw it at the person's house you don't like. I did that. Now, if I get my friend Stacy, who's got a criminal record and not particularly nice, and say, Stacy, go and burn this person's house down for me. I'll buy you some hobnobs if you do it. What's that? Because that's not a spell. I'm not doing that myself. I'm subbing that out to Stacy. And that's such a thing as petition work and petition-based spells. If at any point you're asking something else to do the work for you, that's normally what you'd call a petition-based spell. And that's where a lot of people get confused, because people think, well, if I call on this deity or this spirit to get it done, then that's slightly different to a lot of other forms of magic, because sometimes they'll look similar. They'll get the little petition they'll write out on a piece of paper, fold it up and stick a candle on it, and they'll think that form of magical spell is the same as other forms of magical spell because a mundane just sees a candle burning. But actually it's slightly different. It's a case of you're offering a spirit something, maybe it's a candle or something like that, but you're basically getting something else or someone else to do the job for you. Whereas a lot of the time when we teach spellcrafting, we stop and put a hold on that and say, no, we're going to teach you how to do it yourself. And then when you learn how to raise the energy and the fuel yourself and program it properly, then we can start adding other forms of energy in. And when we can do that, then we might start to ask something that's quite powerful to also get involved in the action. I think the big difference between spell casting and prayer is that when you pray, you hope, and you hope that spirit's going to go about and do what you want to be done. Yeah. You're not really so much in control. You're basically saying, please, can you make this happen in this way that I want it to happen? Whereas when it comes to spellcraft and witchcraft, you're basically forcing that change. You're doing it yourself. You're the one that's kneading the dough and making it. Whereas going and getting the Betty Crocker, just add water bakery mix is a little different, because all of the work's being done by something else. You're not really doing it. You're just adding the water and saying, this is what I want. Is that right? Would you agree? Or is that a bad example?
It's a sloppy example, but it's fine. You're normally better than that. But yeah, I think it follows the fact that actually, whereas so I think prayer is one end of the spectrum. You've got spellcrafting the other, and then in the middle I think is petition work, because it's not quite spellcrafting, but it's not quite prayer. So it's kind of I think that kind of scale is a good one to kind of mark it on. So you go to church and you pray for something to happen, or you are trusting that you're asking directly. And depending on your denomination, obviously, I'm over simplifying the matter. Don't start telling me between what different churches do what. But there is that kind of directly asking. It doesn't need to be written down. It's not a binding contract. It is simply you asking a favor, shall we say, of a greater power. So that's prayer. Then you kind of move over a little bit more towards petition work.
Bribery.
Which in petition work, it's bribery. Yeah, it's contract and bribery. Like that is the kinds of petition work that you've got. You do this for me,
and I'll
do this
sacrifice
for
the
you.
chicken for you.
Yeah.
Don't go and sacrifice chickens, guys. There's easier ways of doing it.
Yeah, save the chicken.
Yeah, go for a neighbour you don't like instead.
Dear. This is just going to keep happening, isn't it? Okay, try not to take Liam a little bit too seriously. And I'm just as bad. I'm not excusing myself, but just saying that, yeah. So with petition work, that's different. So that is a case of you are kind of formulating a contract. You want X to happen. So, you want the focus point of the triangle to happen. You might provide some of the energy, but the journey is a little bit more debatable because you're outsourcing that part of the spell. So you're hoping that you pay the right price in order to get another entity to do the journey point to that fixed focal point that you wanted to happen. So that's kind of petition work, and we can go into deeper about it later. And then obviously spellcrafting is very different. So with the spellcrafting, you're providing the energy for it to happen. You are mapping out the journey of how it's going to go in the intended route. And then obviously you get to a focal point that you have designed. So with that triangle, then it's a case of balancing the triangle every time. So have you got enough power to make the intended route and the focal point happen? If you don't have it, then it's not going to happen. If you're too strict about how the journey is going to happen, maybe you don't get the result you wanted. Or you've got too strong a focal point, you haven't really thought about how it's going to get there, and that will depend on the journey that it takes. Now, the example I always use for that is the winning the lottery one. So lots of people talk about, I want to go win the lottery. If witchcraft was a thing, or if psychics were a thing, you'd all be rich, right? Because that's how it works. You snap your fingers.
Most of us are.
Well, yeah, there is that. Yeah, those that are good at it don't have a financial problem, shall we say? Yeah, but why do you try and set me up like that?
Carry on. I won't interject.
So the whole point of my story, Liam, was the fact that everybody goes, I want, the first one, I want more money. And the first response that I give to that is something along the lines of, how do you want to get this money? And you have to consider that part of the journey. And I don't mean plan it. That's not what I'm talking about. You need to have considered it. And the rule is that we always go by is that magic will always take the easiest route. So, where attention goes, energy flows. So it's going to take the easiest route. So if you've not been specific at all about what you want and how you want it to happen, it means that, I want money and I want money now. You then walk onto the pavement, go to cross the street, and a bus hits you. You then you move for the rest of your life, but you did get a massive compo claim. So you got your result that you wanted. The energy that was required is obviously whatever you paid or whatever it was done, but you got the result that you wanted, but you didn't get it in the journey that you would like. Yeah. So go on, now you can interject.
Well, no, I was going to agree. I think it's there's a massive breakdown in communication between people that teach. Most of the time, people that teach spellcraft don't really understand it, because it is a subject all in itself, and there's lots of different types of spellcrafting, and then there's also rituals and stuff like that. So I think in terms of reverse engineering spells and things and casting spells, you should never ever do a spell that you don't understand how it works. So if you can't say to me before you cast that spell how it works, then don't do it. Learn how it works first. And also, if you're adding what you'd call ingredients or using tools for your spell work, if you can't tell me why you're using that, and by the way, the book told me to use it because it's associated with
acceptable
love
answer.
or some crap like that is not good enough. Okay, you need to be able to tell me why you're using that. And if I turn around and say, well, you're not allowed to use that, substitute it for something else, and you can't work, well, what am I taking out of that spell by not having that there? You know, really understanding the ingredients and stuff. Because spellcrafting is a little bit hit and miss, much like cooking, right? So in the kitchen,
it's more of an art form.
You buy a cookery book and someone's created that cookery book that you're supposed to follow because they thought of the recipe and how the taste is supposed to be and all that sort of thing. Magic doesn't work like that. It's very often sold that it does. It's sold that you just need a recipe, you just need the right spell, and then it will work out. In reality, that's not the case, because you really need to understand, and the more you get a feel for the flavors and how much to add of what and what you're even supposed to be adding in the first place to get the results you want, is a little bit more complicated. So we got a question coming in that is basically, how does a ritual take place and what do you do? So we can answer that, but probably first we should rewind a little bit and say what you think the difference between a spell and a ritual actually is.
A ritual, yeah.
You know, so what would be the difference for you?
Okay, so for me, a spell would be complete. So in its process, it is a complete bundle. So that, you know, the difference between a spell, like, so a spell could be a charm bag, little glass spell. It could just be a candle and you know, some incense or whatever. Like, that to me is not a ritual. Now, a ritual is when a plan has to be concocted and executed in a specific order. So, you know, for me, a ritual is when there is a reason for each part. It has a beginning, middle, and end, and has to start somewhere and get to somewhere else. And there is a series of stages between them. Now, spell work isn't like that. To me, spell work is the cauldron part. It is, I've got some ingredients, I've got some, you know, some magic words or whatever that you're going to do in order to make it happen. You know, smash them together, and there you go, spell done. Now, that can still be complicated. You might have words that you want to say or whatever, but the order doesn't have any significance. To me, a ritual has to have, like I said, a beginning, a middle, and end. It needs to have gone through a journey. Would you agree? Is that an easy enough explanation, the difference?
I'd break it down. So literally, if I read the dictionary definition of ritual, basically a religious or solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. So if you think about your daily rituals, you get up and you brush your teeth, that's you rinse and you repeat. So you repeat that, it's the same all the time. Think about rituals as something similar. So it's a set of practices that you do, and then that then gets copy and pasted. You do that again and again and again. Ritual work tends to be the sort of thing that you repeat over and over again. So things like cleansings would be more of a ritual. You can do cleansing spells, but actually if you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's more than likely going to become a ritual, kind of like a perfected set, an orderly thing, prescribed essentially. So it doesn't really change all that much. Spell work I tend to think of as a lot more like cooking and a lot more experimentational, and like you said, single use, really, because you can do spells that you continually add to that, you know, carry on, but it is one of those things that there's a result. So you're doing that spell, you're creating that spell to get you that result. Rituals slightly often different. Really, when you put it down to, you know, the real basics of it, magic is magic at the end of the day. People get hung up with, is it ritualistic magic? Is it ceremonial magic? Is it witchcraft? Is it spellcasting? Doesn't really matter. Magic's magic. When me and Chris, and I'm going to talk for you now, so jump in if I say the wrong thing, right? But I'm presuming you're going to agree with me. If me and Chris wanted something to manifest, we wouldn't be thinking, oh, Shall I do a ritual, or shall I do a spell, or shall I do this, or shall I do that? We'll be thinking, what's the most economic way for this to happen? And what's the most fun way, or what way do I want to approach it? So I could create a ritual or something like that I continue to do over and over again, or I could create a one-use spell, one-time spell that would do that. It's really a case of things like words, ritual, spell casting, that sort of thing. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create a little department within magic, or a little umbrella term, and it's really not such a great thing. A lot of these kind of ideas come from books, because obviously you turn to the rituals in the books, or the chapter on spells in the books, that sort of thing. When you practice magic, it's a lot more organic. So you're always,
it's kind of chicken and egg situation, is it?
Yeah.
Is where a case of, you don't go, I want to use a puppet, so therefore I'm going to do this kind of magic. It's the other way around. So you have a desired focal point of how you want to get there, and then you kind of figure out, well, how exactly do I want that to play out? Well, depending on how you want it to play out will depend on what ingredients you use, what method of spell you use. Like, you know, so for example, I'm trying to think of a good example. So for a attraction spell, for example, you're not going to necessarily use a puppet. You could use a spell, but the most effective way of using it would be something like a charm bag or something like that, that is carried upon the person and is attracting to the person. You know, it's like putting a magnet in the pocket and attracting things to it. So you're going to want it to be able to switch it on and off when you want the attraction to be working, when you want the attraction not to be working. So, you know, the same way, if you're then creating a charm bag for sleeping, you're struggling to sleep, you've got insomnia, you're not going to want the thing that puts you to sleep to be in the car with you when you're driving. Like, you know, so there's how you interact with the spell and what ingredients are used in the spell are all going to be based around that journey and that end point. So, you know, it's very rare you're going to start with the energy that you're going to use and go, well, what do I do with this?
Yeah. So when you're a witch, or when you practice magic, it's all about perfecting techniques, and all of those techniques and ingredients and things go into your toolbox. You're understanding things that you've mastered, abilities, whatever you'd call it. Much like a tradesperson has a toolbox, they'll use specific tools in that toolbox to fix a problem. If there's a leaky pipe, they're going to be getting out tools that fixes the leaky pipe. Now, could I use a spirit level to hit a nail in? Yes, I have done that before. Is it better to use a hammer? Yes, generally better to use a hammer. When it comes to the designing of spells and rituals and stuff like that, don't know a single witch that is competent anyway, or experienced, I should say experienced, that doesn't make their own. So they don't take things from other people. They don't read things in books. Doesn't really happen. Normally that's people stumbling around trying to get tools to put in their toolbox. They'll buy a Lesser Key of Solomon or a grimoire or a spell book or something, trying to work out, okay, I need some spells that work for me, instead of actually working out and understanding how the spells work. Completely understandable, because we've all got to start somewhere.
It's like any good chef that you know, any good baker. You know, you all buy them a recipe book every year, the latest one that comes out, but very rarely are they going to actually do the recipe exactly how it is in the book. They might keep them all on the shelf and go, oh, I fancy doing such and such this week. I'll flick through a couple of those for some ideas, see what it triggers. Like that's exactly how, you know, yes, we may have occasional grimoire or whatever, or, you know, that's been passed over, or a friend's giving it as a gift. You're not necessarily, or, you know, you want to try a new kind of craft, you might buy a couple of books to kind of go, well, how are they doing it? You're more likely to go and ask your witchy friends, how would they approach this problem? And it be more of a kind of communal, kind of like picking each other's brains on how you would do something before you then go and craft your own version.
So
Looks like we've got another question.
Let's take apart quickly before we move over to Gary's question. Let's take a ritual apart and explain how it works. So basically, a group of people want to make contact with spirits of the dead. Yeah. So they're not able to do that because they're not psychics, mediums, whatever. They're just mundane people. So what we do is we'd say, okay, let's design, make, and hold a ritual magic in order to make that happen. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to think, okay, what do we want to happen? We want spirits to manifest in front of these people, spirits of dead relatives or whatever it is, okay? So what we'd want to do is we need to think, okay, how are we going to do that? What's prohibiting that from happening when they try to do it on their own, blah, 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 blah. So we would create a ritual that would enable that to happen. So we hold dumb suppers, obviously, which that's the purpose of a dumb supper, essentially, to do. So when we didn't really create the dumb supper ritual. We basically edited it. So pimped it out to make it a little bit more suitable for mundane people. So we look at, okay, what needs to happen? Okay, so the people that are in this ritual, they're not psychic. They don't have any psychic, so they need help with that. The spirits are going to struggle to manifest because they're outside of their natural environment. So think of taking a fish out of water. The reason people, everyday mundane people, don't see spirits and interact with them is because they're not really best suited for the physical world. It's literally like taking a fish out of the water. It struggles to manifest. So we've got two things there. We need to make the mundanes more sensitive. We need to make the spirits strong enough to be able to manifest in this room or in the atmosphere, that sort of thing. So how do we go about doing that? We might go about creating a ritual space that makes the ambience, the room, full of the energy necessary to kickstart people's psychic ability, but also to help spirits manifest within that room. So you're looking at, okay, what do I want to happen? What's prohibiting that from happening? How do I compensate for those things? So you could create a ritual and utilize various ingredients, spells, whatever, in order to make that happen. When you perfect that system and then can pass that on to someone else, that's when you're going into kind of ritualistic and ceremonial magic normally. Whereas what you tend to find with a lot of spellcasting and stuff is a little bit more research and development. You're constantly editing and messing about with things to see how things work. Normally, when you've got a set procedure, the sort of thing that you're looking at with a ritual, then you should be able to give that to someone that's got half a clue and they be able to copy it. So the dumb supper ritual that we hold is designed to teach mundane people that have never experienced manifestations of ghosts and things before, give them a procedure to put in place in order to go home and do that on their own without us. Yes, there are some things because circumstances change. Obviously, we have competent witches that are normally there to set that ritual up, but we can normally, and we can deal with anything bad that might happen. But there's procedures there. There's basically a formula that we've created, which is the ritual process. So that is the ritual. The ritual is the formula. The spell is the formula, what you're adding to get to that method. So the next question, that made sense, Chris, didn't it?
To a certain extent, yeah. I think what you probably confused is at the end you kind of suggested that they could come to harm in some way.
Bad things that was like happen. Normal. They don't happen very often. We did that one supper. Something happened. Something negative manifested. A number of people are like, so you got rid of it, didn't you?
But I get, yeah. But the difference was in that is a public ritual where there's a large space, lots of people. Yeah. If you're one-on-one or a small group of you gathering round, then you don't have the same levels of risk. But it's the idea is you could shrink down the exercise that we did, take it home with you, and do it without there being any witches there. It's not necessary. The difference was we created an actual space, include an altar to the dead, which means it comes with additional risk of, you know, the fact that Santa Muerte is there letting people in, you know, so different. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Okay, so next question is from Gary. What's your thoughts on people that try and put hex on people and it's just for their own uses and not done for the right reasons? So, ethically speaking, it's not for us to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I personally don't care. I don't think you care either. We don't tell people what is morally or ethically right or what's morally and ethically not right. What we will do is we'll say, well, I would or wouldn't do that for such and such reason. We teach a lot. We mentor a lot of people. Not everyone has the same morals and ethics. There are people that do things that we are not prepared to do. There are people that won't do things that we are prepared to do. So in terms of what I think about those people, I'd say none of my business. Personally, don't care much about people that go and hex people. If someone came to me and they said, I want to hex someone, I'd say, right, okay, do you know how to do that? If not, I can explain that to you. You know, if someone came to me and said, you know, I think I've been hexed, blah, 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 how would I go about undoing it? Something like that. Again, I don't personally care. We care. We're kind of like Wikipedia to a certain extent, or like a science teacher. If you put into Google or something how to make a bomb, Google will tell you. If you ask us how to hex someone, we are going to tell you how to go about doing it.
Doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it.
Well, yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to do it, but we're normally on the mentorship program anyway, when we mentor people, we will break it down and help them learn how to do that. But we do put little tidbits in terms of, just because, not from a morality perspective, understand, but from the perspective of understanding how things manifest and the reasons and the most economic ways of doing it. Someone might
it's a discussion. It's a discussion about cause and effect.
Yeah, cause and effect. So someone might come to me and say, well, I want to hex this person, I don't like them. Take the example of, I want to hex a paedophile because I don't like paedophiles. Quite a common one. I might turn around and say, well, if you don't like paedophiles, probably not such a good idea to hex them. Probably a better idea to do a transparency spell so every person they ever meet knows they're a paedophile. If you hex them, it's like a magical punch in the face. I'd say really what would solve that problem is probably attention going to that person so that they get arrested and stuff like that. Yeah, that would probably be a more economic, a better method for doing that. So I'm not going to turn around and say you shouldn't hex that person because it's bad, and you'd be a bad person if you did that, because I don't care. What I'm more likely to do is critique someone's approach and say, well, actually, there's better approaches.
There's a more efficient way of dealing with that
problem.
There's
a more efficient way of doing that. That's basically,
why are you dealing with that problem in the way that you suggested? Is there a better way to do it? But it comes down to essentially that is the fact that we don't really do witch for hire stuff, do we? To a certain extent, it's a case of we tend to teach. So if you're willing to take the consequence, and I don't mean karma or rule of three crap, I'm talking about if you are prepared to take on the consequences of it. So I mean, what actually will happen? So, you know, I want to cause that car crash. Are you happy for the fact that actually the person that happened to be in the car crash is not the only person that's going to be hurt? Or are you going to make sure that they just crash into a lamppost on an empty street because they're an idiot and they're going to drive at that speed and smash into a tree? The only person that's going to get hurt there is the person and the tree. But the difference is, if you go, I want him to, die in a car crash, have you considered that actually there might be 3 other families involved in that? It might be a police officer, it might be an ambulance man. Have you actually considered what you're asking for and how that is going to play out? Again, it goes back to the triangle of, have you looked at the route? What is the easiest way that magic is going to make this happen? Are you prepared to allow that to happen? Or are you going to make steps in order to make that not happen, therefore needing more energy and more work into actual planning? But yeah, it comes down to, we are happy to give you, freedom of information. You ask the right question, we'll be able to give you an answer. The question is whether or not you are prepared to do the work that's involved and deal with the aftermath of it. Is that a better word? Aftermath rather than consequence?
I think from our perspective, if you look at it, to give the most mundane example, seeing as you're talking about hexing in that question, if someone came to me and said, Liam, I want to punch that man over there in the face, how do I do that? I will say, I'm not going to start saying, well, that's not very nice, is it? What I'm going to say is, I'm going to say, this is how you hold your fist. This is how you hold your fist properly. This is how you put your weight behind it. Go in front of this punching bag. Try that technique out a couple of times. Assess that person. Do you think that they're going to punch back? Are they in a position to punch back? If they do punch you back, are they likely to overpower you and knock you out? How can you take precautions to stop that? We take you through the whole process. That's what a proper witch should do if they're any good at mentoring. So talking about like what you said, Chris, we do the occasional work for someone, but because nowadays our main focus with the Thoth Witchcraft Shop, which is where we work, is the main priority there is to teach people. That's what we tend to do. Most of the time, we will teach other people how to do it themselves. Sometimes they're trying to take on something that's really big and outside of their level and ability to do, in which case we sometimes will get involved to help them do that. Or we'll break it down and say, well, actually, it's like training for a marathon. You're not ready for that bit, but we'll start training you to get ready. Yeah. So the next question is, what advice would you give for protection when investigating or dealing with spirits? Ooh. So
the first thing that springs to mind is, are you prepared for the consequences of poking that bear? Is really how it comes down to. You would approach whatever animal you were walking up to, whether it be a little kitty cat or a tiger. You're going to make the decision and take precaution, and you're going to approach it in the correct way. Ideally, if you're wanting not a negative thing to happen, you'll approach it in a way that is, positive's a bad word, but is going to have, it's polite. There you go, politeness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a difficult question because a lot of it goes down to common sense and applying common sense to your personal knowledge of how magic works, how spirits work. So again, because we like to use mundane examples and then move that onto magical examples so that you kind of, can follow.
Can follow us.
If you understand what you're dealing with, you need to ask yourself, what do I understand about where I'm going or what spirits I'm dealing with? If I go on safari and there's lions, most people will know that it's dangerous to go and poke the lion. So that person that's going into that situation might take a tour guide with them with a shotgun or a tranquilizer gun or something like that. Might be in a shielded tank or something with nice windows to look at the lions, that sort of thing. They're going to take precautions from that. So when it comes to when you're investigating or dealing with spirits, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what spirits am I dealing with? And the second thing is really, when you're talking about protection, it's war. It's you versus them. Who is more powerful? Who is going to be able to best the other in combat, essentially? So that's going to depend on your ability. Now, most of the time, because I think a lot of this is kind of on this channel would be paranormal investigation, wouldn't it? So I think a lot of you guys that are currently listening are probably listening from paranormal investigation perspective. Luckily, with paranormal investigation, most of the time you're dealing with spirits of the dead or something similar to that. Super easy to deal with, never a problem. They are the most easy to deal with. They are the easiest thing to get rid of, and you can't really go too far wrong when dealing with spirits of the dead. They struggle to manifest here anyway. That's why, most people don't accept that they are actually a thing. It's because they're fairly limited as to people's everyday nuisances that can be caused by them. So if you're dealing with that sort of thing, again, it's really difficult. Whenever it comes to protection, it's really a case of putting common sense and using your knowledge to the best of your ability to counteract foreseen problems. If I am a bodyguard and my job is to take bullets for people, I'm going to be wearing a bulletproof vest, because the chances are at some point I may be in a situation where I need to do that. If you're exploring buildings whereby there's a lot of people getting possessed and stuff, the chances are if you're going into that environment, you may need to work on your defenses in regards to spirits possessing. So it's all about ability at the end of the day. You can always
your first line of protection is knowledge. So your research of the space itself before you go into it. Don't go in there blind.
Yeah.
And knowing what level of protection is required if something should go wrong in that space. So it's like, there's no such thing as a catch-all protection charm, if that makes sense.
It's like drinking. Know your limits, right? And take precautions. You can get blind drunk, but you need to know your limits and not end up having your body pumped all the toxins out and stuff. You don't want to end up going to hospital.
If you need to be driven home, then make sure there is a driver there for you, or you're willing to pay the taxi.
Yeah. So with regards to protection, cookie cutter protection that is often sold, don't like it, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, just surround yourself with an egg of white light energy and stuff like that. And well, or carry some bloody crystal or something like that spirits don't like. Well, yes, that could have an effect. And you could go into 10 places that are full of spirits, and all of those don't like the crystal you're holding and will run away from the little crystal. But at the same time, it's not going to protect you from other things that are out there. So it's really a case of common sense and really being very aware that, because you're always going to take risks when you're dealing and pushing yourself down a magical path and you're investigating and exploring. Exploring is exploring the unknown, let's be fair. So you're always going to not quite have enough information, but what tools are at your disposal to use? Do you have a shotgun? Do you have a shield? Or do you have the magical equivalents of those things? So again, we need a super specific case. Again, this is why we do one-to-one mentorship, because we assess the person's ability and then help them train to get further and further, greater abilities when it comes to anything really, protection or spellcasting or whatever. So there's no cookie cutter ones that you can approach for everything. The one thing I would probably say is don't piss something off, which I think someone's already said. But at the same time, if you're dealing with some spirits that are very, very, very strange and inhuman, then you're not going to understand what's going to piss them off. I mean, think about all the stories of the Fae. The culture is so different that you even saying thank you to such a thing pisses it off.
I don't think we even go to the Fae in the first episode.
Let's not talk about the Fae then.
You're not going to come into the Fae, walking into a house that's only been boarded up for 10 years and has only existed since the 70s. Like, it's not going to happen.
No, that's true. I should not have mentioned the Fae.
Comment
Do
to
not
make.
talk about the Fae. Do not draw attention to it. Let's skip over that subject.
We can cover it later, but my point is not episode 1. My answer is actually saying classification of spirit is something you should probably be spending your time understanding. So what is the difference between a ghost, between a spectre of a pre-recording, where literally all you're watching is something that's going to happen the same time every time? If that's probably a pre-recording, there's no sentience to it. So what are you scared of? You're just going to go watch it, see it happen again. If you're then dealing with an actual spirit that is sentient, has some knowledge of whatever level, then you're going to have to approach that in a different way. If you then go into a house that has got a known poltergeist in, you're going to take the appropriate level of precaution with that. That's the difference. So a catch-all protection, not necessary. What you need to do is know what tools are going to be required depending on what house you're walking yourself into. Go on, Roy, you were about to show.
Well, it was basically someone that was given a couple of answers in regards to, obviously, don't annoy the spirit and piss it off and stuff like that. So quite wise words, I'd say. So I thought I'd put it on the screen, but I think it was covered mainly in what we've basically just talked about. But yeah, so obviously keep your questions coming in. I think we've got 10 minutes, haven't we, left? So in regards to the aesthetic of spells, because a lot of people get drawn into the way spells look, the actual physical, tangible objects. Is he using a poppet voodoo doll? Is he using a candle? Is she using this? Is she using that? That's what people see. They see ingredients. They think of it like chemistry. They think, well, that thing plus that thing plus that thing plus that thing must equal the result. And that's what you see on films. You see a little bit of Eye of Newt poured in the cauldron, a little bit of that, and there's somehow some sort of magical, alchemical, process that's going on that you don't understand it, so you just call it magic, when actually that's not the case. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that, and they're just generally ingredients that are being used for a specific purpose. Again, that goes back to you don't really design things based on the aesthetic and what it looks like, or you don't just use a doll because people like to use dolls for hexing or stuff like that. You think, what is the most logical perspective to take here? What's the most economic? What have I got in my arsenal? What do I know how to use? What am I competent and capable of using? What's in my cupboard? Am I going to be if I wanted to do a spell to bring me some money or something, and I open up a book and it says to use such and such, chances are possibly not going to work, because you don't know. If you don't even know why you're adding that ingredient to the spell, how are you going to really expect it to work? And then also, when it comes to substitution, if you're following someone else's recipe and you've not got that herb or that thing in the cupboard, are you really going to wait for Amazon to come and deliver it? I mean, I know we've got Amazon Prime nowadays, but come on, think about, what can I use instead? If you can't turn around and say, well, I haven't got any of that, so I'm going to use this instead, or go about it in a different way, then the chances are you probably don't know how the spell works. So there we go. So any other questions, let us know. But I suppose we should probably have started by talking a little bit about us and what we do.
I was just going to say, we haven't mentioned us at all. That's probably where we should have started. We assumed you all knew us and are here because you know who we are. I suppose that how presumptuous.
All three of you.
All three of you.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit, because we're covering spellcraft, and let's talk a little bit about who we are, and let's talk about that sneaker competition. Because so for people that want to practice their spellcrafting, we got a cheeky competition. So we are from a company called Thoth, which is a UK-based company. Thothwitchcraft.com is the website that you can find us on. It's a witchcraft shop, but we also do mentoring one-to-one through Patreon. So basically what people do is they say, I don't know anything about witchcraft, can you teach me? In which case we might adopt them as kind of like, we don't like to use the term students, it's more mentorship, because a lot of it is kind of or we have other practitioners that are actually practicing witches that might say, well, I've reached this level and I can't get beyond that. Can you help me push past this current level that I'm on? In which case we say, yeah, okay, let's go and do that. Individual things. We do the occasional event and stuff like that. Most of the events are targeted at beginners and the inexperienced, mainly because a lot of the time, if you're a witch, then you will have other means of finding out information and other means of contacting people for mentorship, versus the mundane on the street that's never really had any experiences with magic or witchcraft. Perhaps they're not particularly sensitive or psychic. They don't know where to turn. They turn to the little psychic fair because it's a psychic fair and they presume, oh, there's magic people there or something. Or they might do a little Google and think, I need to buy a spell kit, or I need to do this, or what's hoodoo oil or something like that. And they might think, oh, there's someone doing a class on that down the road. I'll go to that class. So we do hold these sorts of things, don't we? But most of it's really the cool
I want
stuff.
to say breathe, Liam. Breathe.
Breathe.
Breathe. That was a lot of information. But yeah, essentially we do live events when we can. Obviously at the moment with COVID, not a problem, not a possibility. Obviously there are lots of ways to get in touch with us. We put as much information out there as possible. So the website is great. Also where you can buy shit from us, lots and lots of shit. And then obviously, we also have a couple of Facebook groups. So depending on where you sit will depend on where you go for them. So the Witchcraft Live Facebook group, called that because it's all demo stuff. So literally it is full of video tutorials of how different subjects, how to approach them, how we approach them, kind of lots of places to just kind of whet your appetite, but are given from our experience as opposed to something you can read from Scott Cunningham or from a blog or from Pinterest. So it's a good place to go. Then also it's a little community of people that are at that point in their craft and want to kind of go, okay, well, I feel like I've read everything I can. It's now starting to look a bit samey. Can I try something new? Obviously, we do have the No Holds Barred. That is for kind of the intermediate kind of witches that want to talk shop. So you probably don't want to dip your toe in there just yet. But that does come with a brilliant podcast that we both do. It comes out every Thursday, so that's cool. I was just going to say, mentoring though, the choices are start with Facebook Live, see what's there. If you still feel like actually more personal help rather than help from the group, then mentoring, you go through our Patreon, and you can find the details on our website.
Yeah, so if you're wanting to delve into magical practice, witchcraft, anything like that, then join the Witchcraft Live Facebook group. It's free. There's a lot of video tutorials in there and a community of a lot of our clients that ask magical questions and things. And then what we do is we take those questions and produce a mini video. Normally it's live. That's why it's called Witchcraft Live. So people like to add comments and stuff like that. A bit like what we're doing now, but more specialist subjects. It's not designed to be a curriculum, but if you look in the guides button, it will progress on and on and on. So you will start with basic concepts of magic, and then it will go up to things like exorcisms and banishing, and then eventually it will go on to like foundational magic. So the sorts of stuff the witches actually end up getting involved with.
It's like book. It kind of whets your appetite for, I kind of want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. As for the mentoring that we do, we do that through Patreon. So through distance is basically we agree with you or the person what you want to accomplish. So where do you want to go? What do you want to do? So some people might say something along the lines of, well, I want to know exactly what happens after you die. That's your goal. You pick a goal. We help you work towards understanding and getting to that goal. You might say something along the lines of, I want to master spellcraft, or I don't know, I want to bump someone off. Who knows? Could be anything. I want to create my own I want to create my own goddess. Something like that. That was a popular one. Create your own spirit, something like that. We'd say, okay, we'll take that, your goal, and we'll train you how to get there. Works kind of like a personal trainer. So you pick the goal. We have breakdown, normally weekly or monthly meetings with you, tell you what to do, you go away and do that, and then we build on from a knowledge perspective,
your skill level,
doing things in your skill level. Magic has always traditionally been taught one-to-one or in very, 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 very small groups. No one ever really writes books, because books, it means that you can't really put anything in. It's not about being secret. It's about, if I write something in a book, it would take me an entire book to explain to the majority of people what I meant. And it's always going to be taken in out of context. Whereas in one-to-one mentorship, if you don't understand something, we can literally turn around and give a different example. Or if you don't quite master
a longer explanation, or
if you don't quite master that technique, then we focus on that. So it is literally, that's the thing. I think it only costs like £3, something, £3.50, something like that, for us to mentor you, because it don't take much effort from our perspective. You're the one that's doing all the work. We're just telling you what to do, With regards to the Witchcraft Live Facebook group, we have a little competition on at the moment. So if you're new to spellcasting or want to practice some of your spellcasting, go to the Witchcraft Live Facebook group. We are going to be casting a spell, and you're going to be casting a naughty spell if you're on my team, and a good spell, if you're on Chris's team. So you need to pick a team, and as a group, we're all casting spells for a specific reason. You can have to go there and find out, because I'm not going to tell you what it is. Those people that want to get involved, you can let us know in the group. Say, I want to be on Team Liam or Team Chris or whatever. And then the winning team in the beginning of March is going to be announced, and you're all going to get a prize. So if you want details, because I didn't really explain it, go to the Witchcraft Live Facebook group or go on Thoth TV. That's our YouTube channel, isn't it? But just go to the Witchcraft Live Facebook group, because there's so much stuff in there you might find interesting. And if you are witches out there with a little bit more knowledge, then, and you find all this spell casting boring and you're looking for the next thing, try the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast, where we discuss intermediate forms of magic that goes over most people's heads. I can't remember what the last thing we discussed was, but it was probably a little bit naughty, because it's a rather naughty podcast. But I think we're actually
last week wasn't too bad, actually. I think last week was down the rabbit hole with
that was it, down the rabbit. No, that's coming out tomorrow.
Oh, was that tomorrow's?
Yeah,
sorry. What was last week?
I don't
Love
know.
Spells.
Oh yeah, was that love
Valentine's?
spell? Yeah, you won't learn anything from that. That was us
No.
just taking the mick, really.
Yeah.
But try
Before
it.
we go,
again.
a couple of comments from Karen.
Do we only get an hour on here? I don't know.
I think so, because obviously, you know, we can stay longer if people have got questions, but
Let's stay until we get told off, everyone. All right? Because there is another. There's other questions that's coming in. So we're just gonna stay and keep going until we get cut off or told off. Okay?
Yeah.
So we've got magical knowledge has always been passed down by word of mouth through generations. Books are great, but mentoring, if you want it, is better if you have the opportunity to do so. Yes. Witchcraft's a craft. Magic is something you do. It is an art form. Think about other art forms, trades, artists. They don't learn through books. They might make a start by trying to do that, but actually, when you go to trade school, I went to trade school.
You learn by practicing.
You learn by actually doing, and a little bit about theory as well. And that's how we teach. So a lot of practice and a lot of actually doing stuff and finding out and answering your own questions. Because that's what people have. People have questions of, how does that work? What is a spirit? How do I dissect a ghost? You know, find out what it's made of and all that sort of stuff. Well, rather than us tell you, because that's what religion does, they tell you how you're supposed to think normally. We say, okay, this is how you're going to go and find that. Here's a little experiment. Go away and do that. Come back to us with the results of what you do. And then we discuss it. And then when you've learned something from that, we send you off and do another thing. You know?
Yeah.
It's quite fun.
You missed the previous one.
Oh, sorry. Is that... This was fun, thanks guys?
No, the one before that.
Well, I like that one. Oh my god, I'm pretty basic when it comes to my craft. I do what feels right.
Yeah, you are, Liam. Like, why are you even on this show?
I can be chanting, have flames, candles, etc., or chuck a bunch of herbs, powders, oil into my cauldron from my kitchen cupboard. That's what we call organic spell crafting. Not because you're using a free-range chicken, but because you haven't got a set procedure. You know what you want, but you're intuitive spellcasting might be a better way. You're letting the ingredients speak to you and pulling and, you know, that sort of thing. Works for some. Other people are a little bit more left brainy and logical, I suppose. Yeah. But brilliant. That sounds good.
At the end of the day, correspondences aren't necessarily going to work for everybody. This is why we don't like them. This is why I like to shout at people for sticking with their Scott Cunningham books. Is because that pushes down a particular kind of rabbit hole, which suggests that, you know, if you want to do a love spell, you've got to use red or pink things, or, you know, or that you can't, you know, or rosemary is a substitute for everything. I could go on a massive rant. I won't. Just go to our podcast and you'll hear all my rants about Scott Cunningham. Is that the one that's next month?
That's the Wiccan Messiah. That's I think that's next week's podcast. Is what would Scott Cunningham use?
Yeah, what would Scott Cunningham use? So, but you know, it's a case of we prefer I think largely, I'm speaking for you there, but I don't know if I can, the more intuitive method. You can teach a framework, but that framework must be malleable to you. At the end of the day, if I was going to do a love spell, I'm never going to use a pink or a red. I don't like pink. I can't stand the colour. So obviously, you know, if I was going to go for something that I'm attracted to, I'm trying to get something attractive, I'd probably go with a blue or a green because those are the colours that attract me. So, you know, by applying that logic, you then kind of like, well, that makes no sense. That's not what Scott Cunningham said in his book. You know, it's, you know, candles again. If you like them coloured, yes, by all means use coloured candles. But actually, what's more important is that you know what you're powering and how you're powering and what that energy does. You know, that's the important part. So yeah, rummage. One of the first things I normally say is when someone starts out is what's in your kitchen. Go and rummage through your cupboards. What do those different flavours? I know I always use, that's the sense I always go to, flavour. You know, always go to what sorts of flavours are already in your cupboard. You know, what does cumin make you think of? What does sage make you think of? You know, obviously new age shops that I try and avoid. But you know, or you move on to the kind of the chili peppers. Everybody's got chilies or something in there. Vinegar. You know, what do all these things do to your taste buds? How does your body interact with them? How does it suit you? Like, you know, if you're doing a spell that's going to calm your stomach, for example, because you've got anxiety, you're not going to use chili powder if you've got IBS. Like, not because you're going to put it into your body, but your body already dislikes chili. So why would you use it in a spell? Like, you know, I'm trying to, you know, give the kind of mundane answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We're doing this show on Wednesday nights at 8 every single week. So feel free to tune in every single week. And what we're trying to do is break down and go into a lot more detail the subjects that you're kind of asking us. Obviously, this is the first one. So we'll go back over the comments and have a little look at the sorts of questions that you've asked. So feel free to ask more because we'll be reviewing this. And then what you might find is we might do an episode dedicated to specific things. So there's a couple more questions that have come in. I'll breeze over this one quickly. What's good protection against negative spirits? Reason I'll breeze over that is because we've kind of already talked about protection. So my question to you, the lines that you should be thinking, because the real problem is you can't protect yourself against something that you can't protect yourself from. If you think of a negative spirit as something nasty that's out to get you, equate it with a schoolyard bully. Okay, what did Karate Kid do? He learned how to beat up the schoolyard bully. If you're that worried about negative spirits, then the best way to protect yourself against them is understand what they are, how they work, and, you know, basically be able to develop the ability to rugby tackle one of those spirits to the ground and destroy it. Then you won't worry about protecting yourself against it. In fact, they're more likely going to run away from you, like the schoolyard bully does when you punch him round the face for the first time. So there we go. How did you get started in the craft? Difficult question.
Yeah. Difficult for us because what we keep being called is super witches. Which means we don't have hereditary magics, and we were never taught witchcraft formally. I suppose is why we keep being called super witches.
There's a kind of thing within the witchcraft and magical community that everyone always talks about, discovering that they're a witch for the first time and learning things and getting books and sneaking witchcraft books out from the library or Googling things. Wasn't really a thing for us. We kind of just went from a very young age and just continued and pushed it. We had that ambition to continuously push ourselves. And we're the sort of people that kind of just go for, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to give up until I crack that. Whereas some people look to be led. We're not fans of curriculums. We're never looking for a way to be guided unit by unit through, you know, advancing in craft. So for us, it was literally a case of every obstacle we came across, We just try to find a magical solution for it. And when you work a lot of magic, funnily enough, you learn a lot about magic. So experience.
It's like when you learn, you know, you go and play football for the first time and you naturally realise, oh, well, I've never done this before, but I've got a really good right kick. Like, you know, then go, oh, okay, well, I'll start with expanding that. How do I get better and better at it? And then, oh, okay, well, I'm good at that one. I best learn to kick with the right, you know, and then you kind of keep going until, you know, you're a professional footballer player.
Yeah.
But,
hereditary and also intuitive. I hid my craft for 20 years. I hid my craft for 20 years. Then I got a kick up the behind at 40 years of age. Lol. Set up a business to help others. That's really cool.
I'd like to know what the kick up the arse was.
Yeah. You will find that that's quite a common thing. So one thing that you do tend to find with people is that they lead, a lot of people that lead very busy lives that are always concentrating on something, whether it's raising a family or their career or something like that. When they get to the stage where they actually sit back and calm down, a lot of psychic ability and various other things tend to switch on at that point, because you're consciously so focused on your everyday mundane life that the other world and the other things don't tend to make it through. But as soon as you let go of that, and sometimes in retirement, you'll find that's a big thing. So getting close to retirement, or when the kids are grown up and all that sort of thing.
Got more time on your hands.
Come into this kind of path just because they start having weirder and weirder experiences and stuff. And they kind of think, well, I've actually got the time to actually start looking into this now. Whereas for other people, of course, some people from a very, very, very early young age get bothered by things. So it's quite interesting the way it works for some people. But yeah, so in terms of hiding your craft and that sort of thing, I can kind of relate to that. But yeah. So we've got another one coming. I enjoy reading and listening to everything. I'm not a witch, but I'm interested in it. I personally don't know what I am. I am me. Best thing to be is yourself. People throw a lot of these terms around: witch, magician, psychic, all that bollocks. At the end of the day, we're individuals. A lot of the time, people would try to communicate and sum up what they are in one word to make other people aware. But at the end of the day, you can only really get to know someone by getting to know someone. And a lot of these words that people throw about are trying to sum up so much in one little word. The reason we use the term witch is because stereotypically we get accused of it all the time. And when you do spellcasting and speak with spirits and do all that sort of stuff, people start telling you that you are a witch. When people start telling you you're something, then you've got to decide whether you're going to adopt the word or whether you're going to fight against it. And I think we just stopped fighting against the word witch. We kind of said, yeah, look, let's be fair, we are. So, you know, in regards to 43 not retired yet, I wasn't necessarily talking about you specifically. Okay, everyone knows that anyone over 30 is old, let's be fair. But I can say that because I'm in my 20s. Almost over that, but you know,
not for much longer.
I'm still young for a little bit, you know, a couple of months. But yeah, in terms of like what I was talking about with that kind of a thing is literally more a case of distractions in life. So many people are led and interested in the magical path, but something always stops them. They're always kind of like, oh, I'm interested in that, but they never really go for it. And yeah, any kind of craft you need to dedicate time to. But at the same time, you also need to ask, you also need to ask yourself, you know, are you going to commit? That word dabbling springs to mind, Chris.
I love to dabble.
Well, there's a difference between dabbling as in experimenting and messing about, and a difference between dabbling as like playing knockout ginger. You knock on the door and run away. That's the sort of dabblers I don't like. Notice I said that, not paranormal investigators. The sort that say, yeah, I'm interested in this, and then as soon as something happens, they run away screaming out of the
I run
room.
away
That
screaming.
might just be Yvette Fielding, I don't know. Maybe the rest of them aren't like that. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe that's just the ones I've met.
Yeah,
They
it's
say,
just
yeah,
the TV ones you're used to seeing.
we're going on a ghost hunt. We're going to catch a big one. We're not scared. My stomach rumbled. Let's run away screaming. Doesn't really fly in the witchcraft world because you'll come up against things that are a lot worse than a stomach rumbling. So definitely, if you're the sort that's going to stand your ground, witchcraft might be the thing for you. Might be something to consider going in because it takes some bollocks, I tell you.
Right. I'm wondering if we have covered everything that's in everybody's questions.
I think so.
I think we have. But yeah, at the end of the day, we'll be here. We'll be here every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. And then we'll go with it. You know, we like ideas. Everything we do is based on reacting to content that people want. We put a base amount of information out there, and then, you know, as ideas kind of trickle up, we produce new content. So it won't be any different here. So it's a case of, you know, if enough of you really want us to do a workshop on something, I suppose we could do that. We could see how that works. You know, or, you know, if there's a particular subject you want to hear more about, then just, you know, hit us up in the comments, you know, pop over to the Thoth Witchcraft Shop Facebook page, you know, Witchcraft Live, anywhere you can find us. Just leave comments here. You know, we'll be back again next week, so it's, you may as well leave them here. But, you know, interact with the content that we've got out there already. And if you feel like something is missing, or we didn't tell it from the right perspective that you understand it, we can do it. We can do it here. So you know, it's not going to. We're never going to run out of ideas anyway. So it don't feel like you have to. But we like ideas.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about and so much to cover. But there's no point in us covering random stuff. We'd rather cover things that you're interested in. So literally reach out and tell us. And again, just because there's a theme for this, it doesn't mean that we can't produce extra content on top of this and stick it in the Witchcraft Live group or something. But there we go. Yeah, I used to think that at 25 years old, over 30s are old. I know.
He hasn't got long to wait, so don't worry. He'll soon be.
I already feel old.
So.
But there we go. We've been here for over an hour and a quarter. So thanks everyone for watching. And, you know, maybe we'll see you next week if you're still around and you don't think, fucking hell, those two weirdos, I ain't tuning into them again. But,
or you know, cut because we went over our time and we weren't supposed to.
Yeah, we might be sacked. Imagine that. Yeah. Keap on Chatting Network. They might sack us for going over or for saying too many swear words. It's always a possibility. We don't know. We'll have to see.
Liam is a liability.
I am a liability. Yeah, they do say that.
Right, we'll leave it there.
Right, goodbye everyone.
If you're tired of all the neo-pagan claptrap that's on the internet and want to see some real witchcraft, please subscribe to the Thoth TV YouTube channel. If you really want to kick things up a notch, try clicking the No Holds Barred podcast link.